Good afternoon if you're in the Eastern or Atlantic time zones, and good morning for those of you further west. And welcome to the Future of Workplace Culture webinar. I'm Marty Parker, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Waterstone Human Capital, and I'm joined today by an incredible group of leaders from Canada, some of Canada's top organizations. We're going to get to them in just a few moments, but I'll quickly just introduce them first. Joining us is Robert Bartucci, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Glen Dimplex Americas. Heather McLachlin, President and Chief Executive Officer of Cowan Insurance Group. David Patchell-Evans, who we'll refer to as Patch, the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of GoodLife Fitness, amongst other things. And last but certainly not least, Lee Piccoli, the Chief Executive Officer of Fusion Homes. And before we get to our panel and our questions, and a number of which you've sent in today, and thank you for that, I just want to spend a few moments talking about some of the ways of how we have worked and where we've worked, and what's that mean in terms of the change of workplace culture and the future of workplace culture, which is significant. Mahatma Gandhi said that the future depends on what you do today, and I don't think that that is ever more true than it is right now. A little bit about how and why and where work has changed. When we think about the workplaces many of us today dealing with, and it will be more in the future, less of us in the office. In fact, all of us are doing these webinars today from home, and except for Robert, I believe. But that will lead to staggered work days. That will lead to differences and changes in health policies and systems and checks, to workplace redesign in terms of our physical space. The office will become, in some cases, the face-to-face place or the meeting place. We'll see, automatic doors and a lot of non-touch related systems and cleaning processes that will be implemented. Many of those that we've already seen taken place. Safety obviously becomes preeminent. And of course, the local kind of becomes global. We can record meetings and time zone them. A lot of things that are happening and being facilitated through digital space will impact our workplace and how we work, and more about that soon. Clearly, travel and meetings have changed substantially as we now have less requirement or no requirement in global instances to travel, and we've all shut things down. And as price and costs increase on travel, we will look at more options for digital meetings and ensuring that when we meet, it's really important that, and only important that we meet in person. And of course, those things will come back. But all of these things combined really means that culture becomes king. That in fact, if culture was your competitive advantage before, it's even more so now, because our physical and virtual or digital experiences are combining. And this is an opportunity where we're seeing enormous change in terms of a sea change, if you will, a paradigm shift. And we can look at the changes that are happening to our culture, either to respond to them and or to get ahead of them and curate or design our cultures to facilitate this. In other words, the focus on how and what gets done really is trumping or is much more paramount than the when and where. And as we see organizational changes, we're seeing the changes to our team member experience, whether it become, for those of us who've had new team members start work, onboarding them differently, performance managing them differently, and the digital or virtual experience needs to rival what has typically been the physical experience as well. And so flexibility and lifestyle become tools as opposed to concessions as they were in the past for some of us. And as I mentioned, that office becoming the meeting place, but will also be influenced by the comforts and creative spaces at home. And so this is not to say that social interaction and physical meeting is not important. It is imperative. The decision as to how we do that becomes more important. And we see really 5 cultural transformation type tenets or success factors, if you will. The concept of personal wellness becomes center in culture. where whether it be physical, emotional, mental, even spiritual health becomes a center part of how we work. And this will be reflected in the offerings that we provide to folks both in and outside our office. Clearly, all of these things were happening previous to the pandemic, but will be facilitated, ameliorated, and sped up by this. Leaders and how we lead and the selection of our leaders will be different. In terms of new kind of leadership attributes, leaders need to be more agile. They need to be more digitally swift, if you will. I'm having so many discussions on the concept of digital empathy. How do you know how people are feeling? How do we get around this? How do we support them during these difficult times, but also as we move forward? Even recruitment, we're seeing the territories for where we search are broadening. In fact, that maybe this leader does not need to be in my office, and maybe that opens up my ability, my opportunity to find them in other markets. So personal and team performance is going to become much more self-driven, in many ways digitally enhanced and monitored. As speed increases, facilitated by this new virtual world and enhanced digital world, bureaucracy decreases. And so, benchmarking, dashboarding our performance. In our own case, we're moving to a digital phone system where everything, your phone systems follow you and are in the cloud and being driven by really technology. But the actual measurement of calls, the use of calls, the tracking of it becomes much easier, which is important, certainly in our recruiting side. Training and development and skill enhancement, particularly for leaders in adapting to this, become, again, central to this transformation. And purpose, we know that profit and purpose can coexist, but the impact and the meaning of work now changes, particularly for those of us who are Generation X and Generation Z or Z, for our American friends, becomes much more important and central. And so I've often been quoted as saying that culture should change slowly. It's painful when it changes quickly. It should only change quickly when it has to. But we are in a cultural change. We are in a paradigm shift. And so it is a requirement for us to redesign our human capital systems and in turn our cultures to support the businesses, not just that we have today, but into the future. As a result, we're spending at Waterstone a lot more time on cultural transformation services, which we kind of offer through Engage today, our culture and engagement measurement and advisory practice. Facilitating these challenges and getting ahead of them is critical. Applying best practices, which we've certainly learned through our work and through Canada's Most Admired, and really looking at an investment of cultural transformation and getting ahead of it can really have an incredible return for your business, and looking at the business that you want tomorrow and the culture to support it. It's not unlike a health assessment that we go through. We know we want and need to make some changes. What is the planning to make those changes? What is the work? And so we're working with organizations as coaches and as kind of trainers to navigate that process and help through that change. And if you really would like to spend more time talking about it, reach out to us and we'll do that, because the transformation of your culture is something that you can either choose to kind of follow what's happening or get ahead of. It is one of those times that you can curate it. And so we really want to access our panel today and talk about the changes in workplace culture. And so I'm going to start with you, Heather, and maybe ask you inside of a minute or so if you can describe how your culture, the Culture Account Insurance Group, has helped you weather the changes of this pandemic and has brought kind of maybe some changes to the way your company and your team works.
Thanks, Marty. It's a pleasure to be here with Patch and Robert and Lee and yourself, Marty. In thinking about it, a colleague said to me, you learn so much about people during a crisis. And I have to say that the culture part, which has become our glue during this crisis, has been really something that we've leaned upon to help us get through. And we have a very collaborative culture. Our business relies on the clients in which we do business. So certainly there's an element of multi-stakeholders as we work our way through, given the fact that we're an essential service across our 12 offices. the way that people have collaborated and demonstrated empathy to clients, as well as, Marty, you mentioned the importance of speed and the ability to adapt to new technologies and other things, has certainly been something we're very proud about, and something that's enabled the business to be strong and resilient through these tough times. So from a cultural perspective, I would say the culture is as strong as ever. And it's been one of our success stories that we've relied on with respect to values and how we behave and how we treat our clients and our community as we've gotten through this.
Thanks, Heather. Rob, what about you and at Glen Dimplex? Tell us a little bit about how you've weathered these changes and maybe how this pandemic has facilitated, changed, or enhanced the way that you work together.
Yeah, so look, we are an amalgamation of two really old businesses, that were 40 plus years old, and we've put them together to try and create a new organization only about 18 months ago. And the work that we did during those 18 months was really to try and create an environment that culture could grow. And culture, I've learned the hard way. You can water it as much as you like and encourage it as much as you like. It is not the view of the CEO. It's not the view of a handful of people. It is really what grows organically through this. But the reality is, when we lay a good base or a good foundation for that, culture will grow from it as it sees fit, much like a flower that we plant. And so we have what we call 5 agreements that we deal with, in which we want to share, we want to celebrate, we acknowledge that done is better than perfect. We don't want to compete, we want to win, we want to challenge our future. And through this pandemic, it's been amazing to see that about 80% of the people in our organization have really grabbed these unifying statements and allowed us to grow the business and grow the culture. And in fact, the connections and the interdependencies between the people in our organization have gotten much stronger. I say that about 80% of the people have taken that. It's a very interesting study of people that about 20% of the people, and probably not the people that I had anticipated, are really, really struggling with this. But the thing I'm most proud of is that 80% of people have actually grabbed onto that other 20%, and they're trying to drag them along with them. And so the camaraderie and family that we're seeing, frankly, is something that we could not duplicate for 18 months when we physically were in the building. And as soon as we left, human nature was that we tried to help one another. And we're seeing that right across society, but it's also great to see it in our business.
Fantastic. What a great example. Thanks for that, Rob. Thank you, Heather. Lee, I want to start with you. What have you seen in terms of your role as a leader in supporting your team and setting up the organization and culture moving forward? In other words, how much time have you had to put into kind of your culture and people through this challenge, and how have you seen that kind of affect the performance of the business?
Yeah, I think the question that almost all leaders are facing and have been facing for the last period of time is what to do when nobody knows what to do. And we're in this environment where we're in a race against time with competing priorities and facing a level of uncertainty that, frankly, none of us were trained to do. Like we're trained to manage risk, where risk is probabilistic, but with uncertainty, you can't assign probabilities to this. So what's required in this environment is, some sort of rapid innovation under stress when you're surrounded by fear. And so what we've done as a company, the first thing we had to do was get really clear on our priorities. And so we said employee safety is going to be number 1, customers, and then the financial well-being of our people and the company, in that order. The second thing is, adopting a very agile method of problem solving and making decisions. So this is a transformation that we started 2 or 3 years ago, and we started with, the way we plan and forecast. We started transforming our people and our departments into more of an agile team of teams type of approach. And it's served us well in this environment because it's allowed us to make decisions very quickly and execute very quickly. So I think for us, those are the big principles that we've focused on through this.
And you're quite clear on those. So it sounds to me like setting those priorities and staying true to them has made a difference. What about you, Dave? Patch, we'll say, in terms of as a leader supporting your team, helping them move forward, how much time and how have you been able to help your organization kind of use its culture to continue the performance? You've made some early and big decisions, I know, in terms of shutting down the actual centers themselves. So talk a little bit about your role there and the impact that it's had.
Well, when I think about Robert, he just said he took these two really old companies that are 40 years old. We're 41. So I guess that's how I got the gray hair. But we're in the business of changing people's lives for the better. We're in business of making them healthy, making them live long, making them have energy, making them productive, making them enjoy life. So when it looked like the virus was going to take people's lives away from having too much contact, it became really obvious that first and foremost, I had to protect my staff, right? So we decided on March 15th to close the clubs, and we decided at the same time that protects the members, and at the same time we stopped taking money from our members. So we're in a business where it's 100% people pay to come in and get a fitness membership. So essentially we took that whole thing away, and then what our focus and our attention had to totally be on how to make those two groups feel looked after. So first and foremost was our staff, because they're the ones that look after the members. So luckily we had a history of being staff focused, staff oriented, and caring. And caring is the number one priority of our company. We have 7 core values, but I'll just focus on caring right now. Caring is what we do for each other and we do for the members. So the very act of closing the clubs when there was a risk factor showed that caring. And then emphasize the culture of people. And then what we've done is we've kept up constant communication. And as Lee was talking about, and Heather was alluding to, is the government is changing the rules all the time. What's happening is changing all the time. Where the virus is changing all the time. There's a lot of fear. And so by having communication, not too much communication, but just the right amount of communication. And the result has been, I think, that our culture, kind of like Robert was saying, has gotten richer, is because people all of a sudden realize, well, my company is actually really looking after me. My company is really connecting to me. My company actually is showing that they care. Because when there's a high tide and everybody's doing great, it's easy to sit around and poke some holes in things, right? When the tide goes out and everyone's exposed and you actually look after people when you don't have to, and that's the key thing. People know that you're doing what you don't have to. They know that you're doing things just because you strictly care. It's obvious. So that's really reinforced our culture. So I get emails every day that say thank you. 4 lines, but they basically amount to thank you. And I get them from the members too. And so I think that the whole virus has created an opportunity for us to connect as a society and not to take things for granted. And so, if your culture is focused on caring like ours is, I think it's kind of reinforcing it. And everybody wants to get back into the gym, but they know that when they come back, that we're going to look after them. So we have all the things in place from sanitation and cleanliness and staff training. But that's where culture is the key thing, is if you're just doing a service and you don't have the caring part of it, then you're a non-entity. It's culture that creates personality.
Mm. Well, that caring, you were one of the first to close businesses, and there's been a lot of private member clubs that are very much, and we understand why, still charging their customers, but they can't, they're doing other things, I recognize, to try to facilitate this. This was a big decision.
You can't, you're paid to provide a service, provide the service, and if you can't, just hold on until you can.
Yeah. Okay. Heather, what as it relates to the short term now, And in terms of your culture, what are you most worried about? What's keeping you up at night, whether it's about the business or your people, and how are you kind of trying to address that?
Yeah, loaded question. Good one though, Marty. Short term, two different answers. Certainly back to Patch, what you were talking about, the health and safety of your teammates and your staff is paramount, because not only do you care, but they deliver your brand to our clients. And so while you're observing businesses going out of businesses, and our clients experiencing significant economic challenge like we're facing in Canada and worldwide, if you back to our teammates and our employees, it's the speed of change. And Marty, you talked about speed. And so it's their ability to adapt, and it might be on a simple level, to adapt to technology, or how do I communicate with a client using Microsoft Teams and I'm not comfortable with the technology. Like there's germane issues like that, but then there's broader ones where, there's isolation for single people, there's working parents that have young kids at home. There are challenges that we have to appreciate as leaders, to be transparent about what those challenges are. They do impact productivity. Be empathetic, which is what our culture is all about, vis-a-vis caring. And then, on an even broader scale, there are things like mental health, Marty, that I worry about and we talk about. And everybody has talked about the importance of communication during this time. And so whatever channels we choose and the frequency in which we do so, to be authentic leaders and to address and to say, yeah, we've got EAP and we need to provide services, but you got to go a level deeper to say what gets at the essence of the culture that's going to help people get through. And a lot of that is we lean on each other and collaborate, and we need to have some fun, and we need to inspire, and we need to be honest about the challenges that the business and our clients are facing. There's just so much wrapped into that, Marty, in terms of what we need to do. And it's changed really your focal point as a leader, which is good. And you mentioned it every day it's different. It's true, because there is so much unknown. But if I go back to sustainability, the business, caring about our clients, caring about our community, caring about our employees, Marty, those are my three. And then there's a whole series of things that we're doing in order to adapt and make sure that our culture remains strong and true to who we are from a values perspective. So
seems to be a real focus amongst the four of you, for sure, in terms of how you're going about this. Rob, in terms of what's keeping you up at night and worrying you, what are those things, and what are you doing about it at Dimplex?
Yeah. So look, I think my biggest concern is that employees are going to feel alone. And whether they're physically alone, we have a lot of millennials that we've intentionally brought into this business, who by nature of where they are in life are living in a 600 square foot condo in Toronto all by themselves, or are disconnected from their normal social circles, or used work as one of their biggest social circles. I'm really concerned about people feeling disconnected from the business and disconnected from one another. So, Heather talks about mental health issues and some of those other things that are unforeseen or certainly unintended consequences of this shutdown. My biggest concern is that feeling disconnected. And so I've gone out of my way, to try and follow the fact that, this virus does not differentiate based on race or religion or ethnicity or frankly, even age group, meaning that it will affect all ages, regardless of the fact that it will affect us differently. And so I've gone out of my way to reach out to people to have them understand that we are each going through this in our own way. So I intentionally have my youngest daughter run on screen once in a while. She doesn't see it that way, but I'm having the same struggles as some other folks, right? I'm messaging people saying, look, I'd like to call you. And I show up in my gym clothes saying, look, I tried to plank for 5 minutes, fell and smashed my face on the floor, and we get to have a giggle about it. We each put our pants on one leg at a time. And there is a real need in the business for hierarchy at different stages of what we're doing. But right now, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a guy who's struggling to try and keep his fitness level up. not sleeping at night because I'm worried about what's going to happen. And so really my biggest concern is, how do we stay connected in a way to human beings that feels authentic? And if we can do that, the people in the organization are going to want to lean in and help one another. And that's really been the biggest challenge. And frankly, I'm pushing that down to my leadership team as well, because it can't be the Robert story. It has to be interpersonal connections throughout the organization.
Thanks, Robert. Lee, as we look forward, what parts about the way that you're working today, or it could, at Fusion, let's say, and I know you have a variety of other businesses, do you expect to become a mainstay part of the new normal? And frankly, what do you think is going to go back to the way it used to be?
About a month ago, I saw a funny meme, and it said, who's most responsible for the digital transformation of your company? A, the CEO, B, the COO, or C, COVID-19. So I think for us, certainly this pandemic has accelerated our digital transformation. We weren't a company that had a lot of work from home before this. So rather quickly, we had to adapt to this new environment of video conferencing and people working remotely. So I think that we saw some trends in the world before COVID-19. One of them was remote work. And I think what COVID has done is accelerate those trends. And frankly, I think that it's part of the new world that we will live in the future. I think you're going to see companies like mine that didn't have a lot of appetite to have people work from home, that will be more open to it, and we're learning how to do it now. The other area that I think I see for us is the way we work on our job sites. So about 6 weeks ago, before any government mandate, we voluntarily shut our job sites down. So going back to the priorities that we listed to filter all our decision making to, employee safety was number one. So we voluntarily shut down all our job sites for 2 weeks, and we implemented a safe work system. I feel even after COVID-19 is over, whenever that may be, or if it's ever truly over, that a lot of those principles of social distancing and sanitization will remain in place. To what degree, we're probably not sure yet, but I don't see us going back to building homes and building high-rise the way that we did 2 months ago. So I think for me, those would be the two trends that I see COVID really accelerating.
And Lee, if I'm not mistaken, you opened up that new safety protocol to anyone who wanted access to it. Is that not right?
We did. So when we rolled it out, we had a lot of people approach us saying, wow, this is an amazing system. We had a lot of our tradespeople who work for other builders and developers say, wow, this is by far the best system we've seen. We then had other peers and competitors reach out to us and asking us to share it with them. And so we did. And at that point I said, we'll just make it public for anybody to share.
And there's a number of stories like this, which I mean, we've been fortunate at Canada's Most Admired that so many of our participants, winners, et cetera, which you've been, share by the very nature. But I think this is taking it to the next level, quite frankly. And kudos to you and everyone at Fusion, Lee, for doing that. I think you've set a great example, as so many of those of you have. Dave, what about you? What about how you work today, how the organization works today? Do you expect to kind of become part of that new normal? And what do you think will go back the way it used to be?
I think we went through SARS in Toronto with our clubs, and a lot of the same questions existed then. We had members and staff that were affected by it directly. And we were really worried back then that people would never want to be with each other. And they didn't take very long for people just to go back to the way things were. You know, as a human species, you can just see how we've migrated into tribes, we've migrated into cities, and the cities get bigger, right? And a lot of that's because we want to connect. So I don't see the desire to connection going away. You know, the chance to physically connect. I mean, people want to walk together. They could just walk by themselves, but they want to walk together, right? And people want to do a fitness class together, and people want to work with a personal trainer. And we could always all go out and do push-ups and sit-ups on the floor, and we could always all go out for a run. Yeah, why do you see people running together? I mean, I have to book an appointment to meet with you, and I still want to do it together, right? So I think a large part of us will go back to doing what we did, but with one critical difference, is an appreciation of the fact we're together. We won't take it for granted anymore. You know, you won't take for granted that you get to see, my mother's 100 years old. You know, I never took for granted that I got to see her, but I'm sure gonna really appreciate the fact that I get to see her when I get to see her. It's not just how much longer she gets to live, but I get to see her right now. And I have a special needs daughter who, because I'm immune compromised, I've had to have a separate house because the caregivers, one of them got exposed to the virus and that kind of stuff. So for the first time in my life, I've had 5 weeks of not seeing her. Like that's the hardest part of this whole thing, right? So, you know, when I'm with her, I'm kind of going to go, I get to be there, right? I get to go for a run with you. And I think that's going to be the biggest critical difference in appreciation of society for what we've got.
Got it. Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate that. Heather, you know, how do you keep your team motivated and engaged during this uncertainty, particularly when, you know, certainly not every day is culture the mainstay, the focus. We're trying to keep people safe, keep people comfortable, ensure they're not feeling isolated, as Rob said. You know, how do you keep them engaged and motivated?
A great question. David, you mentioned people need people, and I 150% agree with you. So on that note, the keeping people motivated, at least in our team, has been about how do we communicate, and not just in a formal way. And I think we have our traditional channels in our town halls, but then we've created new means to communicate with people. And I think sprinkled in some fun as well, because people are looking for inspiration right now. And so whether that's inspiration through how do I help somebody have a better day? And that might be how do you help a colleague who might be experiencing isolation, like you were talking about, Robert, or how do you help somebody have a better day in the community that might be an at-risk youth? And we're a big philanthropic organization with our Cowan Foundation, but also culturally we have a high degree of wanting to give back. And so you sort of take those pieces of culture, Marty, that are the glue that I was talking about, and then you say, how do you expand upon those in your communication tactics? So I'm not usually the president on the video to be keen, but every Friday I've started doing a video, and it's just a casual one. It's in my family room, and my kids' pictures are in the back. And Patch, like you were saying, you know, you're authentic. And I might talk about resilience one week. I might talk about what we're doing in our communities with the Cowan Foundation to give back quietly to those organizations that are in need. I talk about our clients and keeping a pulse on what's happening in the business, because it hasn't been all wine and roses. You know, we've certainly had a challenging period of the business where we have all had to pull together to help clients get through, whether that's from an economic standpoint or sometimes that's just being a really good listener. And we're in the relationship business. So if you're talking to a client, it's just how are your listening skills today and helping them maybe have a better day. We've done coffee chats, you know, Robert, where you say you pop in and you got your gym shorts on, and I just pop in at 10 o'clock and I have virtual coffee with people, and there is no agenda, and the intent is just Well, if somebody's got artwork from a little one and a toddler in the background and they want to bring that into the call, great, because that's part of who we are. And how's everybody today? And you have not only the tools and the resources that you need to do your job, but your job is so much more right now. Your job is to be a good parent. Your job is to take care of our clients. And so it's a multifaceted challenge that we're facing. And I think as leaders, if we're not respectful of that and understanding and empathetic, then we're not being true to our culture. And all those pieces, Marty, around the motivation, I think it's important for us to think differently, but still behave as ourselves and our authentic selves, because our teammates are looking for us for inspiration, guidance, honesty, as we always would, to help us make it through and to be these great resilient businesses that they're proud to work for, but we got to change it up. And so how do we help them have some fun? And it might be a bingo game, or it might be everybody taking pictures of a working from home team and what are they doing on a Friday. And we've done a whole bunch of different things, like my team does BYOB, and that's stating the obvious. You think, oh, that's booze. No, it's books and what was the best thing that happened in your week. And we've played some games and done a virtual dinner party. And I talk about that because I want other teams to feel that it's okay in the middle of the day, take your dog for a walk. If that's what brings you joy and helps you get back to where you need to, or if you got to spend 2 hours with your kids at lunch because you're shifting off with another working parent, that's okay too. And it's just adapt, communicate, be authentic. And it's all those things together, Marty, that are part of who we are and always was. But I think you're really having to stretch the boundaries and not be afraid to take some risks, to do some things differently, to make sure that everybody feels safe, secure, you're going to make it through, and that element of pride that we can, which then translates to how you conduct yourself with your clients.
Well, a lot of that is being real, and very little of that, maybe it was just where I went to school. I don't know. I don't remember learning that in business school,
No,
quite frankly.
awesome.
And it takes a lot of work and a lot of energy. Lee, thanks, Heather. What about you? How do you maintain a culture during these difficult times? Because you now have people on job sites, you now have people operating and working, and it's business as usual, kind of, sort of, maybe and maybe not for some of these folks. So, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was awesome, Heather. I love that approach. So I agree with Heather. I think communication is key. People are afraid. They're afraid for their financial well-being. They're afraid for their health and safety. They're facing this uncertainty. And so, the type of communication and the way that we communicate is very key. And so what we've adopted is what's called the Stockdale Paradox. And we use this as a method to communicate to our people. And what it is A, brutal honesty about the situation that you're facing, and B, a rational basis for hope in the future. So James Stockdale was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and he said that the people that survived were the ones that were really, grasping the direness of the situation, but still had some rational basis for hope in the future. And so, for us, brutal honesty about the situation is being very transparent about the challenges that the business is facing, being very transparent about the risks that we see in the future and what those mean to the company. And a rational basis for hope, it isn't just saying, oh, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. It's, A, what does the path forward look like for us? So how do we stabilize the company? How do we get through this? And then B, how do we take advantage of opportunities in the future? And, what does that look like for the team? So, we found that, we feel that, trying to soft pedal this and maybe, using corporate speak right now, I don't think it's going to give people what they need during this time of uncertainty. And I think if you look at the world, the types of leaders that are really shining right now are the ones that are bold, decisive, and the ones that are putting people and safety first.
Yeah. What a great example and platform to use. Reminds me a little bit of the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where he assessed during World War II in the concentration camps why some people were surviving and others weren't. And he really talked about attitude, that they were realistic, first of all, what was happening, but they had hope and they created something to live for. And I think the combination of those two things is a really important one. Two questions that we'll finish. So thank you for that. Rob, we'll start with you. Everyone's going to act differently as restrictions and social distancing and self-isolation, all these things start to loosen. But, some folks are going to want right back to work. Others, I'm not so sure. What's this going to look like for me? What kind of conversations are you having now to kind of support one or both of those kind of transitions?
So I think what we're hearing from our employee base is a desire to be together, but a desire for that to be purposeful. And so in the old world, we'd get up in the morning, get dressed, have breakfast, and by default, you would go to the office almost blindly. And then when you got to the office, you may have had an idea of what needed to be done that day, but when you get there, you really decide, okay, this is how I'm going to design my day, and you get to work. What we're hearing is the default position is going to be, okay, where am I going to be most effective and efficient in what I need to get done today? And then we're going to move to that space. And so what we anticipate to happen is our time in the office will be much more purposeful. It'll be more driven around deliverables. And it may not be that you spend the entire day here. And so, and that really, frankly, it has the side benefit of being safer for people, but I don't think that's going to be in the long run the reason for it. We're going to be moving to an environment that is going to be driven by outputs. And wherever we can maximize our outputs is where we will go. I'm in the office today. I'm here because I'm running a strategy session with my executive team. We tried it on Teams. Wasn't very good. We needed to be face-to-face because sometimes as a leader, you need to see people's body language. There's other times when we're passing reports back and forth and we're doing some data and analytics that we're actually far more efficient if we stayed home. And so while we think our environment is going to physically change, we have a big open concept office that we just spent $1.5 million on. It's a little mind-boggling about how we're going to use the space. But the reality is, I think we're going to be able to repurpose the space to be much more collaborative than what it was. And then the space will be empty and we will be okay with that. We were obsessed in the old world of having all 115 people in the office all the time because that's how we thought we were going to build culture. But the reality is we ended up with a bunch of people who really shouldn't have been there in the first place. They should have been out doing things that delivered results. And so I think what we're going to see is a culture that is going to be a lot more results focused. And because of that, a lot more efficient.
So you've really getting your head around the how and what being more important than the when and where. Yeah.
And look, as a leader, a sense of comfort that people aren't going to sit at home in their pajamas and eat bonbons all day. I think leadership was always concerned about that, but our employees have proven to us that they have no interest in that. They want to feel productive. They want to contribute to a shared vision. And so, frankly, it's that 115 people that are putting that kind of confidence back in me as a leader. And frankly, I probably should have had that confidence in them previously.
Yeah, thanks for being so transparent about it. Patch, what about GoodLife? What types of conversations you're having now? How do you see the transition happening in terms of the workplace and what's going to kind of remain and what do you think is going to stay the same or change, I should say?
Well, there's two things here. One, on a basic human necessity level, people are realizing that their health is the most important thing here. So unfortunately, the people that have perished from the crisis have tended to be way more, to be immune compromised in some cases, but they haven't stayed in great shape. And so it's put them at risk, right? So I think people are realizing what was obvious before is the health system's job is to fix you when you're sick, not to make you well. So your job is to make you well. So I think people will come back to the fitness clubs with a greater passion, a greater belief in what they need to do. However, there's an additional part to that, which is right in line with what Robert's saying is when I'm not busy figuring out how we're going to bring our clubs back, I'm creating a different type of membership for our clubs. And the membership is about not getting through things, which you could think about as getting in shape, but it's about how do you transform. So where I'm going is getting in reasonably decent shape is one part of the paradigm of having a great life, or a good life, as I like to say, right? But the next stage is the purpose, is the why. How do you get the best use of your time on the planet? How do you make the biggest difference on the planet to yourself? How do you achieve your highest self-actualization? And you can't do that without health. You can't do that without fitness. But then how do you get to the next stage? And both the books you guys talked about are part of that paradigm that shift that I'm talking about in the writing that I'm putting together. So I see people realizing their primary needs, food and shelter, fitness is now one of them. I got to look after myself. And then where I want to take them from there is to going to a transformational thing. And so you can get through COVID or you can be transformed by it. And what you're hearing, and I've been taking notes from you guys because I'm getting all these great ideas. What you're hearing is you guys are all on the path of transformation. And that's what I think a lot of people are going to be open to and ready for.
Patch, thank you. We've run up against the time, but I want to thank all of our panelists today. Robert Bartucci from Glen Dimplex, Heather McLachlin from Cowan Insurance Group, David Patchell-Evans, Patch from GoodLife, and Lee Piccoli from Fusion Homes. These are, as we've known before this, transformational leaders. And I think there's wonderful examples here. And these are wonderful businesses that have a great commitment to their culture and that the impact that it has, not just on their organizational performance, but more importantly, on their stakeholders, their customers, their people, and they're setting examples. And just by sharing here today, I think are helping us make our futures bigger than our past. So thanks to all of you. And on behalf of everyone at Waterstone Human Capital and Canada's most admired corporate cultures, thank you for joining us. And we'll look forward to, look to the future to see other great examples of how you're helping change workplace culture. Thank you.